Adam Savage in my cave, and I have a project I'm doing soon, and it involves a sphere. That's all I'm going to say. And it involves not just a sphere, but the project is actually a box for a sphere. And in order to contain the sphere in the box, I need to make a spherically shaped void inside the box that fits the sphere very exactly. And I have a device for my lathe called a Holdridge Radii Cutter that is specifically for cutting spheres on the lathe. And I've had this disconnect for a long time about how to use it. I think I've last night, in the middle of the night, I think I figured out something that I had never quite copped to about the spherical cutters. And I'm gonna try it out. I'm gonna need to show you the cutter in order so that you understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Now this spherical cutter is one that it's a make and model that Jamie used to have from the old days of CWI, Chris Wayless's special effects shop from Marin, that was gone long before I ever arrived in the effects industry in San Francisco. But when they went out of business, Jamie bought a lot of their equipment, and specifically their sphere cutter was one that I used a lot in Jamie's shop. I used it on Mythbusters too, and there were some ways in which it screwed up on me that made me like afraid to use it. And I was like examining those, and I pulled mine out and took a look at it, and I thought, yeah, let's get that working. So let's get that working. This is the Radii Cutter. Look at how beautiful. These still show up on eBay. They're not cheap. Look at that gorgeous label. Okay, so the basic gist of this is that it has a handle attached to a yoke here, and that yoke can cut convex or concave. And there's all sorts of different yokes to cut different depths of convex and concave, and these are the cutting bits. All right, with that being said, I also have, hey, don't chip. I also have this lovely, luscious, glued up piece of richlite sitting in my lathe, sitting in my 4-jaw chuck, tightened down. That is the diameter of the void that I'm cutting out of this, the concavity. So I'm gonna mount the Radii Cutter here. I'm gonna align it. I'm gonna get the measurements right, and then I'm gonna try doing the sweeping cuts. Right, first step is cleaning my blade. Take this guy off. Oh, visitor! My visitor was one, and then a second magician for a little bit, just to chat and catch up. Okay. Looks like it's going to be pretty correct. Okay, so now what I've got is the Radii Cutter, right? Which once centered on the long axis will make this sweeping cut into here. But in order to adjust the actual, the exact dimensions of that radius, this tip needs to be a precise distance from the center of my Radii Cutter. That makes sense, right? The tip to the center of this equals the radius that I'm cutting. So how do I do that? Well, I know that that center is 1/2 of an inch behind that line. And so I simply need to make some gauge blocks that make the critical dimension I need, which is 1.8075. And I will make a pair of gauge block stacks for that. And then we will adjust the final distance of this. Okay, so here you can see my setup. What I have here is the center spindle that holds the cutting tool for the Radii Cutter. And we know that from these flats milled on the front of it, it's 1/2 an inch to the center of that bar. And we know now that the block stack, well, I made a gauge block stack. I made 2 of them that are the same height and give me precise radius I want for my radius detent. And I basically just set this up, dropped this piece in, and then tightened it. And I'm exactly where I want to be. Now we're going to put the gauge blocks away before I mess them up. These are the Mitutoyo. Here is where I have run into my mental issues with here's where I've run into my mental issues with how to properly set this up. Because in order for this to cut the radius correctly, it needs to be exactly on center here. And I have had difficulties in the past getting precise with that. And then I realized if this is set to the radius I want to cut, then what I really want is for this to be the exact diameter I want to cut, marry this up to that, and that should give me the radius. Now, I'm sure there are some of you who cut radii all the time that are like, how did that take you so long to figure out? I'm assuming that I'm right, but we'll see. There's one funny aspect of the radius cutter is that it's a big handle hanging off the lathe. And if you use any lathes, you have this deep practice to never leave a big handle, specifically the chuck key sitting out of the chuck. This has a kind of chuck key feel to it. So I'm like, what is that handle? It's like on my peripheral vision, it keeps lighting up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this over here and bring this in until it's precisely touching the radius. And given that this is half the radius, right, then I've got to move the radius in. That's the trick. That's the trick. Okay. So what this is 3.5. I have a diameter of 3.5, and that means I want the cutter here to be exactly half of that distance from the center of the spindle. 3.5, half of 3.5 is 1.75. So I need gauge blocks set up at 1.75. 1.75. So, yeah, we take a 1-inch block and a 0.75-inch block, and we ring them together. Not quite. There we go. Okay, so there's one. Oh, right. See what I got going on here, right? Yeah. How did... Right. I haven't removed the 1/2 inch from there. So it's not 1.75. It's 1.25. Durr. Okay. That's correct now. Let's go back to the lathe. So I'm going to call that my 0, and then I'm going to move out here and move 3.5 inches this way, moving past both my radii. 2, 3. Oh, right. This isn't movement. It's right. So it's got to go 7 inches. Okay. That should be on center. Let's see if I achieved that. Yeah, here we go. I have here a 3.5-inch Plastruct Hemisphere. It is very robustly 3.5 inches. Yeah, very, very, really nice. That is exactly 3.5 inches. And I'm going to, because I don't have my demon core yet. It's coming in a few days. We're gonna test fit. Now here comes the Hemisphere. Boink. That's ideal. I'm not trying to make bearing surfaces here. That's great. That's just what I was hoping for. Nice. Oh, hey, that worked beautifully. I am really pleased. And I'm a little annoyed at myself that it took me so long to figure out. I was like, anyway, I'm just a little annoyed at my own brain for taking so long to figure out how to get this thing nicely centered. All right, so I have an artifact here that I don't love, which is this little, I think it's a function of the epoxy that I used to glue this together. I think it had a pot life, a very short pot life, and I think I put it in too late. And so I had a little bit of expansion, and there's a little, it's not a tear out really, it's more like a scrape. Anyway, I'm gonna try and deal with that with a second pass at this. But like I said, I'm very pleased that I now have a real clear understanding of how my radius cutter works. It only took me 30 years. Yeah, check out my hemispherical D10. I know it's not perfect hemisphere. It's about a 1/2 inch shy of a hemisphere, but demisphere. Let's call it a demisphere. Thanks for joining me. See you guys next time. But wait! There's more to do with the radius cutter. We were filming this morning, Joey Fameli and I, and he was telling me that we're setting up to use my RE2CI 35mm camera for some shenanigans. And this is my ball head from my RE rig. I have some little cinema sticks for this. This is a 150mm ball. And Joey wants to mount it to his little speed rail cart here. This is skateboard wheels that will drive this very stably and gently on some aluminum rails. But he does not have a receiver for this. This is a receiver for a 100mm ball. And I'm going to make a receiver for a 150mm ball is what this is. And we're gonna set up and cut that radius because I've got a gigantic chunk of Delrin that I literally bought like 2 years ago because I was thinking to myself, you know what I don't have? I don't have any 6-inch Delrin. So I bought this. I'm not even sure how I'm gonna hold on to this. I have to think about that. I know how I'm gonna hold on to it in the lathe. I don't know how I'm gonna cut it down because it's very big. Gonna think about that. But in the meantime, I'm going to set up my cutter like you just saw me do for a 150mm cut. I think I'm gonna try to make this cut on the table saw because I can get within, I can get a couple of inches in all the way around on my table sled, and then I can use my Japanese saw to finish off the cut. Cutting large material can be weirdly fraught to get good straight cuts. I think that'll be a good way to do it. Okay. But first, we need if you remember, we need this bad boy set up so that this minus this, right? So that this distance to the center here is precisely 75mm or 2.955 inches. So I'm going to set up a gauge block stack to do exactly that. This process that I'm doing is called ringing, W-R-I-N-G, and so what I have here is a 2-inch, a 0.7 inch, a 0.15 inch, and a 0.105 inch. Those 4 measurements get me to 2.955. I'm going to do the same thing out of my 0 grade set. I do all the problem solving with the cheap set. So 2 inches plus a 0.7. Yes. 0.155 and 0.105. So 0.155. Wait. 0.15. That's it. 0.15 and 0.105. Okay. So the reason you ring is because if you just stack these, you don't get the precise measurement. Now, I'm not working under conditions where I absolutely need a measurement as precise as the ringing, but you know, best practices and all that. So you just join at a 90, and under pressure. Ow. I got so nervous doing it. So that is exactly the radius, the distance between here and here. So we are going to, yeah, excellent. So wow, that is the very limit. Oh, don't you tip on me. That's the business end. That's everything I need. Okay. I am not going to put these back just yet, simply because I might need them again. So I'm going to safely put them over here. And I'm going to protect them with my 1, 2, 3 blocks. Yeah, there we go. So let's start cutting this. So the thing I'm following here is that cutting round things can be deceptively dangerous because they can spin on you. And anything that spins on you can grab a part of you and feed it nicely into the blade. And once the blade tastes blood, you know, it's really hard to get rid of its desire for more blood. So clamp everything in really nice and tight. That's my stop. So I'm going to make a cut, and then I'm going to turn it. I'm not turning on my dust retrieval because, oh no, I guess I can. Yeah. I've had the Delrin make clogs. I hope that doesn't happen, but I can remove them if I have to. Great. Now, I'm going a little bit overboard in the cleaning of this, but given that this is my bread and butter chuck, making sure that there's no debris anywhere and really making sure everything's nice and clean. It's just one of the ways I like get consistent output out of a machine. without having to calibrate it constantly. You know, and I'm aware of like where sometimes I need to have a little more granular QC than others, but for the most part, this keeps this machine really, really tight. All right. Also, like every other operation I'm doing on the lathe, I take it out of gear so that even if I start it up, that won't spin. I love me reversible jaws on a lathe, Chuck. To me, they're deeply civilized. That didn't work the way I thought it was going to. There you go. We're going to start by machining the back side of this, and then we'll turn it over and machine the radius into it. That'll be easier than holding on to it afterwards. Oh, that's close enough. I'm actually making a camera platform. There we go. And that will lock in there. Okay, I believe we are close to getting this done. So here's where we're at. This sits on here. We screw that in with 3/4 20s. Got some marvelous stainless hardware here for that. It's great. Oh, Phillips. Then this guy lives on top, and we have some adjustment, and we've got a keeper nut. This has a little bit of adjustment in it, just a little bit. And you can, so which means you can level it to whatever you're doing and tighten it down. Oh yeah, and it will still pan and tilt, but now it's level. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm so happy about this. It's spectacular. I am so happy. We are going to be getting up to some fun shenanigans with cameras this year and some builds. And I'm really psyched with how this came out. Joey's going to be psyched. Well, we're done with the camera equipment. I just wanted to show you just how beat up the shop gets. That was literally like 2.5 hours, and still just like every bit of the shop is touched by debris from what I just did. Yeah, it's a messy business we're in. All right, we're gonna do some cleanup, open some packages, and go home.